the most common thing in the world, especially for guys who make a lot of money, especially for young guys, is to get depressed or to blow it on bad investments. That happens to almost everybody. When I was in my early 20s, I was making a lot of money from being a proprietary trader. I was working for the biggest day trading firm in the world at that point. One month I took home 100K. You know, this was like 14 years ago. That was a lot of money back then. I was taking home like over 50K a month. I knew at least not to go into bad investments, but when the money dried up and I wasn't able to develop a trading system, I went through some pretty heavy feelings of feeling depressed, and I wasn't able to pivot into the right mission again. So I at least was smart enough not to get into bad investments, but I got hit bad on being depressed, on realizing like having all this money doesn't make me, you know, happy every day. I call this the Elvis example. If you want to see what that looks like, check out my video on the Elvis example and how to avoid it. This is the cause of like celebrity suicides and depression and really successful people, because, you know, when you have the dream, you have something to work for. When you actually achieve the dream, you know, it makes you happy for a while, and then that payoff wears off, and now you're thinking like, what the fuck do I do, right? It's exactly what I went through, and if you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you have gone through that, or you might go through that in the future when you get your payoff. So this also happened to a lot of my friends. It happens to my clients. You know, I've got a friend who was maybe one of the best poker players in the world in 2016. You know, I've got a client who just exited. He's a young guy for $3 million for his tech startup. You know, I had a young friend of mine when I was living in Chiang Mai, Thailand, who made a lot of money and then wasn't able to make any more money and got some health problems and ended his own life, unfortunately. And you know, you see this all the time in celebrities. The latest case is this guy Tekashi 6ix9ine. If you don't know who that is, I'm happy for you. Unfortunately, I do know who that is. And he was this young guy. He was making a ton of money as a rapper, and he decided for some street cred to get involved with the Blood Gang, like these serious gangsters. And apparently they took like $3 million off of him. You know, they hooked up with his baby moms, you know, like all kinds of stuff. And he's getting involved in crimes with these guys. And now he's in court, and he's, you know, was facing like 30 years to life, snitched on all of them, lost a fortune on legal fees. You know, because you become a target when you're successful. This happens to, you know, the vast majority of athletes. They're broke 10 years later. It happens to the vast majority of, you know, a lot of musicians, a lot of celebrities, because they are not business people. They're not entrepreneurs. They didn't earn the money in the, you know, traditional way of like dollars and cents and grinding and stuff like that. They just had this really special skill and a lack of financial literacy, lack of financial discipline. And all that money at once when you're young, it makes you feel like you're 10 feet tall and invincible, and you know, and the money's going to last forever, and you can roll the dice on all these types of different investments. And, you know, you're just like meat for hungry wolves, whether it's, you know, in Tekashi's case, gangsters, or whether it's unscrupulous advisors. You know, even the private banking at my bank was trying to get me in there like crazy. And I said, look, I make a living out of trading the markets. The last thing I want to do is let some guy who's a broker, who's never made a dollar in the markets, broker as a financial advisor, control my money and put me some bullshit mutual funds. I at least knew that because I was financially literate in the investment sense, because I was actually making money in the market, and knew that I would never, ever, ever invest my money with Wall Street. Still never will, by the way. And that's true of a lot of guys who worked in Wall Street, a lot of guys who are ex-traders, including one of my other successful clients who's a, you know, multimillionaire in his 40s. And we laugh about how, you know, no one we know would put their money into stocks. So here's what happens, okay, when you get that big payoff, right? So four bad things can happen. One, you get high on your own supply. So I've realized it's just as dangerous to be in a really peak state as it is in a depressed state. And if you're flying, you know, you just got 2-3 million from your exit, you feel like you're on top of the world, and you were used to living on so little. You're like, well, what's 300 grand in this investment? You know what I mean? I've still got 2.7 million left. Number two, you think you need to be smart and invest, right? You're like reading all the information. You're like, I don't want to be a dummy with all this cash. I can't just let the cash sit in the bank account. I'm losing 2% a year on inflation, man. I got to put it into somewhere, I got to be smart about my money, right? There's all these advisors and my parents and everyone's telling me like, hey, you better invest that money. Number three is you become a target. Like a young rich kid who just got money is like a massive target for advisors or, any type of guy who makes his living off of or unscrupulous friends, right? Like between my clients and my friends, like 5, 6, 7, $10 million that I know of has been lost where guys invested with their friends or who they thought were their friends. And even if the friend was well-meaning, the business didn't work out. I've seen that example happen so many times. And number four, which is probably the biggest one, is you have no mission and you start to experience that Elvis example, right? You get 3 months of payoff or whatever from that big win, and then you're like, well, hey, I have all this money now, but the money doesn't make me happy every day. I've achieved my dreams. This is kind of scary, and I don't really have a purpose here. And you start to feel lost, and you start to feel bored, and boredom is the first step towards feeling depressed. So that's why I don't like exits or hustlers or guys who call themselves hustlers. Okay, I like lifetime missions because you always have cash flow. You're always making money, and you always have a mission. I have a huge game to play within this lifestyle design thing. The guys at the top, the Tony Robbins, the Grant Cardones, are in their 60s and they're still growing. And there's no limit to it. I've got a fantastic game for me to play for the rest of my life, and I'm really grateful for that. So I'm always going to have a mission, and I'm always able to build off of stuff. I'm getting clients now for stuff I wrote or videos I did 3 or 4 years ago. I'm getting compound interest back into this business, and that's only going to scale over time with more followers and all these things. And you have cash flow, right? Like, even if you're sitting on a big pile of money, it's kind of an uncomfortable feeling to be like, hey, my expenses are $6,000. I don't have anything coming in anymore. I'm taking this as a loss. And then that can be, can get some guys to be like, rush into investments sooner than perhaps they should have because they're worried about their newly found burn rate because they no longer have a salary. Which is why I don't like exits. To me, Warren Buffett is still doing Berkshire, and he's going to die on his throne. He's going to die in his company just like Steve Jobs did. So is everyone else on the Forbes 500 list. Carlos Slim, the telecom guy, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, Bill Gates, Microsoft, Steve Jobs, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, Amazon. Steve Jobs only left Apple because he was kicked off, but he ended up back there. So the vast majority of those guys stay in the same vehicle, and the vast majority of that wealth is built in the same vehicle. It's also the case too for, like, they'll say more millionaires are made from real estate than anything else, and perhaps that's true, but those guys, like the Sam Zells of the world, the guys who own the real estate funds, that's their full-time job. Their full-time mission is owning their real estate fund. So that to me is still a mission. It's not like they're part-time real estate investors. That is their life's mission. And it's not a hustle, and there's not an exit, because why would you want to exit a fantastic vehicle? It's like Warren Buffett says, his timeline to selling a company, like his timeline to holding a company, is ideally forever. Ideally it would be a 300-year investment for him or more, because why would you sell a fantastic vehicle unless someone's like crazy overpaid and you feel like you can, paying you like 30 years earnings, and you feel you can go find another similar vehicle that's just as good, and now you've got a massive cash advantage. If they're just paying you 5 years earnings, it's like, well, you've got to go find another vehicle anyway. So if this one's fantastic, why are you selling, type of a thing? Okay, not true in all cases, but in the majority of them, because then you're without a mission, you're without cash flow, and you're without a vehicle to reinvest money into. So that being said, if you're sitting on, if you did exit and it was a hustle, if you had a crypto business or whatever, not going to knock your hustle, especially if you're a young guy and you're sitting on a couple million. Salute to you. Not a hater, just trying to give the best advice for the vast majority of people. And if your money came from poker or whatever it came from, that's all good, because hey, at the end of the day, you won, you made a lot of money. That's the most important thing. So the first thing you want to do is protect that money. Okay, so fuck investing, think wealth protection. The purpose of your payday is first and foremost to cover expenses and to prevent you from going broke and having to work a bitch-made job ever again. Oh my God, I do not ever want to go back to working a job again. I still have nightmares about, being in sales, doing my cold calls, having colleagues. If you're in a job right now, I feel for you, man, and I hope you get out of there as soon as possible. But the number one thing you want to do with that money is make sure that you don't lose it. Second rule of having that money is make sure that you don't lose it. Third rule is don't lose that money, okay? Because then you're back to being a regular person, you're back to being broke, and you have to work a bitch-made fucking job with boring colleagues, and you are not going to want to be alive when you go from riding that high all the way back down to having a job. Just like I did when my trading money ran out and I had to go get a sales job. Would not wish that on anyone.